The day Sergeant Madison Reynolds stepped through the weathered doorway of Bradshaw's pharmacy with a $600 cashier's check in her rucksack, every healthcare professional in Pinecrest Harbor whispered behind their pristine white coats. In this close-knit coastal community, where pharmaceutical knowledge passed from mentor to apprentice over generations, and trust was built through decades of caring for the same families, this former military combat medic with her GI Bill pharmacy technician certification clearly didn't grasp the unforgiving nature of the business she was purchasing. What these lifelong pill counters couldn't possibly know was that their gravest error wasn't doubting her pharmaceutical abilities. It would be underestimating what she was about to discover secured in a hidden vault beneath their very noses. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The salt-weathered clapboard buildings of Pinecrest Harbors. Main Street stood like faithful guardians along the harbor-facing avenue. Their faded signage and worn awnings told stories of more prosperous times. Once a thriving fishing and shipbuilding center, the small New England town had struggled since the closure of the Regional Naval Research Facility 12 years ago, leaving behind a community of skilled workers with dwindling opportunities. Among the businesses still barely surviving was a cluster of healthcare establishments, their waiting rooms filled with hushed conversations and dog-eared magazines from morning until evening. The monthly meeting of the Pinecrest Harbor Business Association was in full swing at Eleanor's Seaside Diner. Coffee mugs clinked against worn formica tables while plates of Eleanor's famous blueberry cobbler made rounds among the gathered business owners. Pharmacists in their professional attire sat alongside doctors in casual clothes, all discussing the same concerns they'd been facing for years: decreasing population, increasing costs, and the looming shadow of the pharmplus chain threatening to siphon away what little business remained. Dr. Thomas Blackwell, whose family had operated Blackwell Family Practice for 3 generations, held court in the corner booth. At 64, his compassionate eyes and steady hands spoke of a lifetime spent caring for the people of Pinecrest Harbor. The Blackwell name was synonymous with trustworthy healthcare in the community, their green and white sign a fixture on Main Street since 1953. Bradshaw finally threw in the towel on that pharmacy of his, Thomas remarked to the small group gathered around his booth. Closed the doors last week after struggling for 5 years? About time, nodded Francine Miller, who ran the local medical supply store that her grandmother had opened after returning from serving as a nurse in Vietnam. Her family had been providing healthcare equipment to Pinecrest Harbor residents for over 50 years. That building's been falling apart since the nor'easter of 19. Bradshaw never recovered after his heart attack. Poor man, who would want that money pit? Asked Robert Garrison, whose ambulance service had been responding to emergency calls from the rural highway since the 1980s. Place needs a complete overhaul. New dispensing systems, new inventory management, new roof. You're looking at 6 figures minimum before you could fill a single prescription. Before Thomas could respond, Dr. Emma Lawson, who owned the newly opened Holistic Wellness Center on the edge of town, joined the conversation. Someone already bought it, she said, lowering her voice slightly. Came in yesterday asking about patient referrals and local healthcare networks. Some veteran who's never run a pharmacy before. A ripple of disbelief spread through the group. Bradshaw's pharmacy had been floundering for years, its outdated equipment and deteriorating building making it increasingly difficult to compete with online pharmacies and chain stores. The county inspector had cited the property 4 times in the past year alone for various violations, and rumors about water damage in the back storeroom had further diminished its already questionable value. A veteran? Thomas's wife, Diana, raised an eyebrow as she slid into the booth beside him. Diana handled the books for Blackwell Family Practice and knew better than most how thin the margins had become in small-town healthcare. What's she planning to do with it? Community pharmacy, apparently, Emma replied, stirring her tea. Said something about accessible medication management and veteran support programs. Had some certification from a military pharmacy technician program. Kept talking about healthcare accessibility and patient advocacy. Robert Garrison gave a derisive snort. Healthcare accessibility? You mean undercutting prices to steal customers? And then marking up medications like those chain places? That's if she can even get the place operational. Bradshaw's equipment was ancient. That dispensing area hasn't been updated in years, and the inventory system was practically prehistoric. Francine added, "Did you see what she paid for it?" Asked Diana, always practical about financial matters. Bradshaw was asking $30,000 last I heard, which was already a steal considering the real estate alone. $600, Emma said, her expression clearly communicating her disbelief. Bradshaw practically gave it away. His children just wanted to be free of his debts and move on. $600? Thomas repeated, nearly choking on his coffee. The pharmaceutical reference materials alone are worth more than that, even if they are outdated. She's got a teenage son with her too, Emma continued. Quiet boy who seemed to be constantly taking notes on his laptop. No husband in sight. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Thomas shook his head. That place needs at least $150,000 in equipment investment, just to meet basic dispensing requirements. The inventory management system alone would cost $20,000, not to mention the licensing fees, insurance, building up inventory with distributors who want payment up front from a new business owner with no track record. I give her till the first inspection, Diana declared with the confidence of someone who had seen many businesses come and go over the years. Remember that guy from Portland who tried to open that specialty compounding pharmacy back in 19? Lasted 6 weeks before the Board of Pharmacy Violations shut him down. The conversation might have continued in this vein had the diner's bell not chimed, signaling a new arrival. The door swung open, admitting a gust of fresh spring air, and the last person any of them expected to see at a gathering of established Pinecrest Harbor business owners. Madison Reynolds stood in the doorway, scanning the room with determined blue eyes. At 38, she carried herself with the straight-backed posture of someone accustomed to military discipline. But there was nothing rigid about her presence. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and while her clothes were clearly new, a simple navy blazer over a white button-down shirt and dark jeans that hadn't yet acquired the creases of daily wear, there was nothing pretentious about her appearance. Beside her stood a teenager around 15 with his mother's square jaw and determined expression, but with sandy blonde hair that made him stand out in the conservative town. The boy clutched a laptop computer, his expression hovering between supportive and mortified at being dragged to this gathering of adults. The pair paused momentarily, taking in the room full of strangers who had suddenly gone quiet at their entrance. Thomas and Diana exchanged glances. Francine Miller cleared her throat. Emma Lawson studied her teacup with sudden interest. Madison took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked directly toward the group of business owners who had just been discussing her imminent failure. The teenager followed reluctantly, a half-step behind. "Good evening," Madison said. As she approached, her voice carrying a hint of a Midwestern accent, but projecting the confidence that belied her newcomer status. "I'm Madison Reynolds, the new owner of what used to be Bradshaw's pharmacy." She extended her hand to Thomas, who seemed to be the center of the group. "And you are?" Thomas hesitated only briefly before shaking her hand. His physician's palm, accustomed to reassuring nervous patients, engulfed her smaller one, but her grip was firm and steady. "Thomas Blackwell. My practice is about a quarter mile east of your pharmacy on Main Street." "The Blackwell family practice," Madison nodded. The family physicians. I saw your clinic yesterday. Impressive patient reviews online. Something flickered in Thomas's expression, perhaps surprise that she had already been researching neighboring businesses, or that she correctly identified his specialty. This is my wife, Diana, he said, gesturing to the woman beside him. She manages our practice. Pleasure to meet you, Diana said, her tone professional but cool. Her eyes traveled to the teenager standing slightly behind Madison. And this is my son, Madison said, resting her hand lightly on the boy's shoulder. He's my assistant manager for the digital side of things. Jackson, these are the Blackwells. They run one of the established medical practices in town. Jackson stepped forward with surprising poise despite his obvious discomfort. Nice to meet you, Dr. and Mrs. Blackwell. Do you use Cerner or Epic for your electronic health records? Mom's trying to decide which system to implement for medication synchronization tracking. The unexpected technical question from a sandy-haired teenager momentarily silenced the group. It was Francine Miller who recovered first, her expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Young man, running a pharmacy involves a lot more than picking software, she said. That Bradshaw place hasn't passed inspection in years. Your mother's bought herself quite the project. Rather than appearing embarrassed, Jackson tapped something on his laptop. We know the building failed the last safety inspection due to inadequate security for controlled substances and ventilation issues in the storage area. But the structural engineer we consulted said the foundation and main building are sound. He looked up from his device. Most of the issues are cosmetic or involve outdated systems that we're planning to upgrade anyway. Francine's mouth opened and closed without producing words. Emma Lawson leaned forward with increased interest. I'm Emma Lawson, she said, extending her hand to Madison. Lawson Wellness Center on the West End, opened 2 years ago. Of course, Madison nodded. You've got the integrated stress management program. Smart addition with the rise in anxiety-related health issues. You know something about mental health? Emma asked, her eyebrows rising slightly. I know something about combat stress, Madison replied. I spent the last 16 years as a combat medic with 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq. The preventative approach to stress management is following a similar adoption curve to what we saw with battlefield trauma protocols. Early resistance followed by rapid mainstream acceptance once the outcomes data catches up. Something in her tone, the precise technical assessment without pretension, seemed to catch Emma off guard. Been in healthcare for 10 years, she said. A hint of pride breaking through her initial skepticism. Started with conventional medicine. Made the transition to integrative approaches when I saw how stress factors were driving most chronic conditions. That kind of adaptability is crucial now, Madison agreed. I hope you won't mind if I ask for advice occasionally. The wellness space is evolving quickly, and I want to make sure we're equipped to provide accurate information to our customers. Before Emma could respond, Robert Garrison interjected. We heard you paid $600 for the whole operation. Quite a bargain for someone with no experience in the business. The question was pointed, almost challenging, but Madison didn't flinch. Mr. Bradshaw's children were more interested in resolving the situation quickly than maximizing profit, she replied. And yes, the price reflected the condition of the property and the outstanding violations that need to be addressed. That's a far cry from being ready to actually dispense medications, Thomas observed, though his tone had lost some of its earlier dismissiveness. You're absolutely right, Madison acknowledged with a frankness that seemed to surprise them. Which is why I've spent the last 14 months taking certification courses and working under licensed pharmacist Jordan Williams at the VA hospital in Manchester. I'm not claiming to have the decades of experience everyone in this room has, but I'm not coming into this completely blind. May I ask why? Diana inquired, genuine curiosity breaking through her reserve. Why leave whatever career you had to take on a failing pharmacy in a town where you don't know anyone? Madison glanced at her son before answering. When my unit was decommissioned last year, my medical specialist position was eliminated. At first it seemed like a disaster, but then I started thinking about what I really wanted for myself and Jackson. She looked around at the community of business owners who had gathered for generations. My father was a small-town pharmacist before I enlisted. I spent many evenings helping him in his shop, learning the basics while planning my own future. When he passed away while I was deployed overseas, his dream of me eventually taking over the family pharmacy died too. I always regretted not having the opportunity to honor that legacy. There was a sincerity in her words that was difficult to dismiss, a genuine connection to the work that transcended business calculations. Jackson and I have been moving with military reassignments his whole life. I wanted him to have roots somewhere, to understand what it means to build something real and be part of a community. When I saw the listing for Bradshaw's pharmacy at that price, it felt like a second chance. Noble sentiments, Robert said, his voice still skeptical. But pharmacy operations aren't a hobby or a legacy project for most of us. It's our livelihood, and it's harder than most outsiders can imagine. The regulations alone on controlled substances require constant updating and compliance. I don't doubt that for a moment, Madison replied, meeting his gaze directly. And I assure you, I'm not approaching this as a hobby. I've invested everything I have into making this work. I've developed a 3-year business plan focusing on medication therapy management, veteran support services, and gradual equipment upgrades that should make the operation financially viable. She reached into her shoulder bag and pulled out a folder. In fact, that's partly why I came tonight. I was hoping to introduce myself to the healthcare community and also to find out if anyone might be willing to share insights about the specific health needs in Pinecrest Harbor. The demographic data suggests a high prevalence of chronic conditions, but statistics don't tell the whole story. Thomas and Francine exchanged glances. Community health insights weren't uncommon among healthcare providers with established relationships, but usually only between those with proven reliability and family connections. What exactly are you planning to focus on? Thomas asked, his tone more businesslike. We're starting with medication therapy management, veteran support programs, and basic dispensing services. Madison explained, areas where the barrier to entry is lower. While I continue to expand my certifications, I'm partnering with a licensed pharmacist from the next county for supervision until I'm fully qualified both in credentials and experience. Her answer revealed more thought and planning than any of them had expected. Even Robert seemed slightly less dismissive. Jackson, who had been quiet during most of the exchange, added, "We're also setting up a digital medication reminder system so people can manage complex medication schedules more easily. Most pharmacies in a 50-mile radius don't offer that level of patient support." "Well, Ms. Reynolds," Thomas said after a thoughtful pause, "I've got some patient education materials on common chronic conditions that we don't use anymore since switching to our new system. You're welcome to have them for your veteran support programs." It wasn't an effusive welcome, but it was a practical gesture of the kind healthcare providers understood, a willingness to help a newcomer, even one they weren't convinced would succeed. "Thank you, Dr. Blackwell," Madison said, recognizing the significance of the offer. "I appreciate that more than I can say." "Call me Thomas," he replied with a nod. "Everyone does." Diana, watching the exchange, seemed to come to a decision. "Have you folks eaten yet? Eleanor makes a wonderful blueberry cobbler. And you should meet the rest of the business community if you're going to be staying." The qualification, "if you're going to be staying," revealed that Diana, like the others, still had her doubts. But the invitation itself was a small opening, a crack in the wall of skepticism. "We'd like that," Madison said with a genuine smile. "Wouldn't we, Jackson?" Jackson nodded, though his enthusiasm seemed tempered by teenage restraint. The prospect of food and potentially finding allies in this new town clearly appealed to him despite his earlier reluctance. As Diana led them toward an empty table, the group of business owners watched with mixed expressions. None of them believed that Madison Reynolds would still be in business when the fall festival arrived. Her plan sounded good in theory, but they had all seen the harsh realities of healthcare destroy better prepared operations than hers. Yet something about her direct manner and evident preparation left them feeling slightly less certain of her failure than they had been before meeting her. She was clearly no dilettante playing at being a pharmacist. Whether that would be enough remained to be seen. $500 says she's gone by Halloween, Robert murmured to Emma as they watched Madison introduce herself to the hardware store owner. Emma considered this, watching as Madison listened intently to Eleanor describing her arthritis, her notepad now in her hand rather than her son's. "I don't know," Emma said slowly. "There's something about her. I'm not saying she make it, mind you, but I'm not betting against her either." Thomas, overhearing them, said nothing, but he made a mental note to check his office for other educational materials that might be useful for a pharmacy getting started on a shoestring budget, just in case. 2 weeks after the business association meeting, Madison stood in the center of her newly scrubbed pharmacy floor, squinting at the sunlight streaming through windows that hadn't been cleaned in years. The building around her was still a work in progress. Fresh paint on the customer waiting area, new LED lighting in the dispensing section, but the ancient security system still made alarming beeps when it armed at night, and the roof still leaked in the corner when it rained heavily. Like everything else in the former Bradshaw's pharmacy, it required far more work than she had initially estimated. She consulted the building inspection report that had arrived yesterday, confirming what she had suspected. The ventilation system would need a complete overhaul before she could set up proper storage for temperature-sensitive medications. The cost would be nearly $18,000 she hadn't budgeted for. Another setback in a growing list. The sound of an approaching vehicle drew Madison's attention. A well-maintained delivery van with Miller Medical Supply emblazoned on the door pulled into her freshly swept parking lot. Francine Miller at the wheel. Madison took a deep breath before walking over to meet her. Though their initial encounter had been civil, Francine represented the established business community that still viewed her with skepticism. "Morning, Ms. Reynolds," Francine said as she climbed out of the van. Her tone was professionally polite, but carried an undercurrent of doubt that hadn't diminished since their first meeting. "Got your order of basic supplies and OTC inventory. Had to special order those medication tracking tools you wanted. Not much demand for personalized medication options around here." "I appreciate you going to the trouble," Madison replied. Watching as Francine lowered the van's rear doors to unload the boxes, Francine gestured toward the building. "I see you've been busy. Got some of that safety work started." "Just the preliminary upgrades in the customer area," Madison confirmed. "The main dispensing area improvements will have to wait until I've built up some operating capital." The inspector wasn't thrilled, but he agreed to a phased compliance plan. "Heard. You hired the Patterson girl to help with the computers and inventory system." Madison nodded. "Layla's been wonderful. Computer science major home for the summer. She's setting up our digital prescription tracking system while she's here." "Layla's a good kid," Francine agreed. "But running a pharmacy business is a lot. More than fancy software and clean windows." She shook her head as she surveyed the property. Bradshaw ran this place with 2 experienced technicians and still couldn't make it work. Bradshaw was trying to run a traditional full-service pharmacy in a building that needed $180,000 in upgrades. Madison said carefully, "I'm taking a different approach." Francine frowned. Bradshaw served patients in this town for 32 years. His father before him. They knew what they were doing. "I'm sure they did," Madison said evenly. But times have changed. Mail order prescriptions, chain pharmacies, changing insurance reimbursements. The economics of pharmacy operations are different now. Maybe in your fancy business plans, Francine replied, her voice hardening. But here in the real world, trying to run a pharmacy without the proper credentials and experienced staff is asking for trouble. First major dispensing error, first insurance audit, first controlled substance inspection. You'll be underwater. Fast. Madison had heard variations of this warning from nearly everyone she'd met in Pinecrest Harbor. The persistent skepticism was wearing, but she kept her expression neutral. That's why we're starting with medication management and veteran support, she explained, and why I've partnered with a licensed pharmacist for supervision. Before Francine could respond, Jackson emerged from the office, laptop in hand and wireless earbuds in one ear. Mom, the website is live and I've set up the medication reminder app. Want to see the user interface? I'll be right there, honey, Madison called back. Francine watched the exchange with a mixture of amusement and something harder to define. Your son seems to be taking to the business. Jackson's always been tech-savvy, Madison replied with a smile. He's already keeping better track of our digital outreach than I could. As if to prove her point, Jackson approached and handed Francine a professionally designed business card. Our grand opening is next Saturday. We're offering free medication reviews and basic health screenings for veterans. The QR code links to our online appointment scheduling system. Francine accepted the card with a bemused expression. Well, aren't you the little marketing director? Actually, I'm the digital health coordinator, Jackson replied matter-of-factly. I've been analyzing the local health demographics. Did you know that medication adherence is one of the biggest healthcare challenges in this county? There's clearly demand for better medication education. Francine glanced at Madison with newfound curiosity. You're teaching him a lot about business. He's teaching me too, Madison admitted. Jackson's digital skills have been invaluable. I couldn't have built our online presence without him. As if summoned by the conversation, Layla Patterson emerged from the back office, her face alight with excitement. Ms. Reynolds, the inventory database is complete, and the prescription tracking system is working with the tablets. We can now monitor medication interactions in real time from anywhere in the pharmacy. The pride in her voice brought a smile to Madison's face despite her fatigue and worries. Francine looked from the enthusiastic college student to Jackson's confident expression, to Madison's determined stance. Something shifted in her demeanor, not approval exactly, but perhaps a grudging recognition that Madison's commitment went beyond what she had expected. Well, you better get a proper medication disposal system set up then, she said, reaching into her van and pulling out a small box. These were headed for recycling, but sounds like you might have use for them. She handed Leela a package of specialized pill-counting trays and safety gloves. Layla accepted the gift with gratitude. Thanks, Ms. Miller. This is perfect for the dispensing station. Just don't expect those fancy computer systems to replace actual pharmaceutical knowledge. Francine added, unable to resist one more skeptical comment. People around here know what good healthcare looks like. Actually, Madison interjected, we've already had inquiries from veterans living in outlying areas about medication management services. They're willing to drive from outlying farms because the nearest VA consultation services are over an hour away. Francine's expression clouded. Country veterans. That's your market, not town residents. Both, ideally, Madison explained. The veteran customers help with sustainability, but I'm committed to providing accessible services for the entire community. That's why our pricing is tiered. Premium services for complex cases, standard rates for basic needs. Don't hold your breath on winning over the locals, Francine scoffed. They've been going to Thomas and the other established providers for generations. She climbed back into her van, her face set in skeptical lines. Good luck with your fancy software and country customers, Ms. Reynolds. You'll need it when winter comes and the roads get bad. Madison watched her drive away, the dust from her tires settling on the freshly painted sign. Each day brought similar interactions, moments of connection undermined by deep skepticism, small kindnesses followed by dismissive predictions of her failure. "Don't worry, Mom," Jackson said, seeing the tension in Madison's shoulders. Dr. Lawson from the Wellness Center said the same thing last week, and then she ended up giving us access to her patient education library. Madison smiled at her perceptive son. "You're right. Actions speak louder than words around here. And our actions are going to build the best community pharmacy this town has ever seen." "The only pharmacy this town has ever seen," Layla declared, with the absolute confidence only a 19-year-old could muster. Together, they walked back toward the office, but Madison paused as she caught sight of an unfamiliar car slowing as it passed their property. The driver, a middle-aged woman in a tailored business suit, seemed to be taking pictures with her. "Phone, who's that?" Jackson asked, following his mother's gaze. "I don't know," Madison replied, an uneasy feeling settling in her stomach. It was the third such car this week, people who were clearly not locals showing unusual interest. In the former Bradshaw's pharmacy. Later that afternoon, as Madison struggled to organize the chaotic medication inventory system she'd inherited, she heard the crunch of tires on gravel again. Looking up, she recognized Thomas Blackwell's SUV with the medical practice logo on the door. Unlike Francine, Thomas had been true to his word about sharing educational materials, though his help always came with plenty of advice and warnings. "Afternoon, Madison," he called as he climbed out of the vehicle. In the 2 weeks since the business meeting, they had progressed to first names, a small but significant sign of acceptance. "Saw your lights on late last night. Thought you might need a break." Diana sent over some of her homemade energy bars. "Thanks, Thomas," Madison said gratefully, wiping sweat from her forehead. "That's really thoughtful." Something in her tone must have betrayed her tension because Thomas's expression shifted to concern. "Everything all right?" "You seem on edge." Madison hesitated. "What's wrong?" Thomas pressed. "Been hearing rumors at Eleanor's diner," Thomas said, lowering his voice though there was no one else around. "Pharmplus Corporate has been asking questions about properties in the town center." Emma Lawson said a representative approached her last week about potential patient referral partnerships. "Pharmplus Corporate?" Madison repeated, a chill running through her that had nothing to do with the air conditioning she'd just repaired. "The pharmacy chain?" Thomas nodded grimly. "They've been buying up independent pharmacies all along the coastline, consolidating them for their mail-order business. Word is they're looking to establish a distribution hub in this region. And they're interested in my property?" Madison asked, pieces falling into place. "The mysterious cars, the strangers taking photos." "Can't say for certain," Thomas replied. "But that Bradshaw building has the best location in the district. Sits on the corner lot with parking on both sides. That's valuable to a corporate operation." Madison felt sick. She had invested everything she had, financially and emotionally, into this fresh start. "They can't force me to sell." "No," Thomas agreed. "But they can make it mighty uncomfortable to refuse. They've been known to buy surrounding properties and then create problems for holdouts, restricting access, filing nuisance complaints. That sort of thing." He hesitated before adding, "Some folks around here might see selling to Pharmplus as a good thing. They pay above market value and the development would bring different kinds of jobs. Not everyone shares your vision of keeping the town center as a community-focused area." The implication was clear. Madison might find herself even more isolated if corporate interests divided the community. "Thanks for the warning," she said, straightening her shoulders. "But I didn't come this far to give up at the first sign of pressure." Thomas studied her for a long moment, before a slow smile spread across his weathered face. "Didn't figure you for a quitter. Just wanted you to know what you might be up against." As he turned to leave, he added, "By the way, Dana wanted me to ask if you and Jackson would like to come to dinner this weekend. Nothing fancy, just grilled salmon and whatever's fresh from the farmer's market. She wants to hear more about that medication reminder system you mentioned. Could be useful for our older patients." The invitation caught Madison by surprise. It was the first social overture any of the established healthcare families had extended. "We'd like that very much," she said, trying not to sound as touched as she felt. Thomas nodded. 6 o'clock Saturday. Then, "And Madison might want to bring that business plan of yours. I know some folks who might be interested in your approach to veteran medication management. Could be there's something to your strategy, different as it is." After he drove away, Madison stood in the middle of her fledgling pharmacy, the freshly organized shelves, the newly painted consultation room, the digital displays showing no appointments yet, and felt the full weight of the challenges ahead. Equipment limitations, community skepticism, corporate pressure. But then she heard Jackson's laugh from the office as he worked with Layla on their website, and she remembered why she had taken this risk in the first place, not just to build a sustainable business, but to give her son roots, purpose, and the satisfaction of creating something meaningful together. The sun was setting over Pinecrest Harbor, casting long shadows across the town center that had been home to family businesses for generations. Madison was an outsider, a veteran with determination and vision rather than a lifetime of local connections. But as she walked toward the office where her son waited, she felt a growing certainty that this place, challenging and unwelcoming as it sometimes seemed, was exactly where they belonged. What she didn't yet know was that the greatest test of that conviction was hidden directly beneath her feet, and it would upend not just her business plans, but potentially global public health security. The grand opening of Reynolds Family Pharmacy exceeded all of Madison's modest expectations. The free medication reviews brought in a steady stream of curious locals, many openly skeptical but unable to resist a complimentary service. Jackson's digital outreach had attracted veterans with complex medication regimens, drawn by the promise of personalized guidance without the long drive to the VA hospital. By the end of the day, they had booked 15 consultations for the coming week and received cautiously positive feedback on their health education materials. "Not bad for day one," Thomas acknowledged when he stopped by late in the afternoon, though the real test comes when you start filling actual prescriptions. "I know," Madison agreed, "but at least people are willing to give us a chance." As promising as the public launch had been, it was what happened after hours that would change everything. Madison was in the back storeroom trying to organize the chaotic supply system she'd inherited when she noticed something odd about the floor near the wall. A section of the linoleum had a slightly different pattern, forming a rough rectangle about 4 feet across. "That's strange," she muttered, kneeling to examine it more closely. The variation was subtle, only visible when the light hit it at a certain angle. She ran her hand across the surface, feeling a barely perceptible seam. Curiosity piqued, she grabbed a flashlight from her emergency kit and examined the edges more carefully. There was definitely a cut in the flooring, deliberately disguised, but unmistakable to someone looking closely. One corner featured a small indentation that might once have been a handle point. "What are you doing back here, Mom?" Jackson asked, appearing in the doorway. "I thought we were getting pizza to celebrate." "Look at this," Madison said, waving her son over. "Does this floor section look different to you?" Jackson crouched beside his mother, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to interest. "It's like a trap door or something. You think there's a storage cellar?" Bradshaw never mentioned anything like that, Madison mused. Neither did the building inspector. They exchanged a look that mirrored each other's thoughts, a combination of caution and irresistible curiosity. Only one way to find out, Madison decided, retrieving a pry bar from the maintenance tools. It took nearly 20 minutes of careful work to break the seal around the edges. Years of grime and possibly deliberate concealment had effectively hidden the access point. When they finally created enough leverage to lift the linoleum panel, it revealed a metal door with an old-fashioned combination lock. "Okay, this is officially weird," Jackson declared, capturing the discovery on his phone. "Who puts a locked door under a false floor in a pharmacy?" "Could be an old fallout shelter," Madison suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. "This building dates back to the Cold War era." A combination lock presented another challenge, but Madison was reluctant to damage it. "Let me try something," she said, examining the mechanism. "Mr. Bradshaw's daughter gave me a notebook with all his father's business information, account numbers, supplier contacts. Maybe there's something about this." The notebook, a battered ledger filled with Bradshaw's cramped handwriting, contained mostly mundane business records. But on the inside back cover, written in faded ink, was a series of numbers with no explanation. 471,956. "Worth a try," Madison muttered, turning the dial carefully. To her surprise, the lock clicked open on the first attempt. "No way, Jackson," breathed. "That's either incredibly lucky or seriously suspicious." Madison hesitated, suddenly aware that they might be crossing a line. "Maybe we should call someone before we go further." "Like who?" Jackson countered. "The police?" "Hello, officer. We found a secret door in our legally purchased building and thought you should know. They'll think we're crazy." After another moment's hesitation, Madison's curiosity won out. She pulled the door open, revealing a set of concrete steps descending into darkness. The beam of her flashlight illuminated what appeared to be a small chamber about 12 feet below. "I'm going down," she decided. "You stay here." "Absolutely not," Jackson protested. "This is exactly how horror movies start. Either we both go, or neither of us goes." Madison recognized the stubborn set of her son's jaw, a trait he'd inherited honestly, and nodded. "Fine, but I go first, and if anything seems dangerous, we're out of there immediately." The stairs were solid despite their age, and the chamber below was surprisingly clean and dry. As Madison's flashlight swept the space, both mother and son gasped. It wasn't a fallout shelter. It was an underground vault about 20 feet square. Its walls were lined with steel cabinets. A desk with what looked like laboratory equipment occupied one corner, while climate-controlled storage units covered another wall, their digital displays glowing faintly in the darkness. "Mom," Jackson whispered, his voice tight with uncertainty. "What is this place?" Madison shook her head, equally baffled. "I have no idea." They moved cautiously through the room. The cabinets were locked, but a set of keys hung on a hook near the desk. Opening the first cabinet revealed rows of labeled vials, each in protective casing with military-style identification codes. The second cabinet contained notebooks filled with chemical formulas and biological research data. "These look like pharmaceutical formulations," Madison said slowly, her combat medic background helping her recognize the basic structures, "but nothing I've ever seen before." Madison led her inside, mind racing. This was happening faster than she'd anticipated. Once they were in the consultation room with the door closed, Commander Mitchell got straight to the point. "Ms. Reynolds, we understand you've discovered something unusual beneath your pharmacy." "How would you know that?" Madison asked cautiously. "We've been monitoring this location for years," Mitchell replied. "When ownership transferred and renovation began, it triggered our attention. When you accessed the vault yesterday, it activated a silent alert system." Madison absorbed this. "So the vault is military property?" "Not exactly. It's complicated." Mitchell studied Madison with evaluating eyes. "Your military record is impressive. 3 Bronze Stars, combat medic with advanced training, honorable discharge. You're not what we expected when the property changed hands. What did you expect? A corporate front, Mitchell admitted. We've tracked several attempts by private entities to acquire properties connected to former research facilities. Your purchase seemed too convenient, especially at that price point. Madison felt a chill. Like Pharmplus? Their VP visited me yesterday, offering triple market value. Mitchell's expression sharpened. Victoria Chambers? Did you mention the vault? No, Madison assured her. But she knew about structural issues I hadn't discussed with anyone outside my family. Mitchell nodded grimly. We've had concerns about Pharmplus's parent company, Nexus Pharmaceuticals. Their acquisition pattern shows unusual interest in locations connected to our former research network. What exactly is in that vault? Madison asked, no longer willing to dance around the central question. Mitchell considered her for a long moment, clearly weighing operational security against practical necessity. Classified pharmaceutical countermeasures, she finally said. When the research facility closed, certain high-value materials needed secure storage. The pharmacy was an ideal location, a legitimate business that could maintain specialized storage conditions without raising suspicion. And Bradshaw was part of this? His father was. Bradshaw inherited the responsibility, though he wasn't fully briefed on the nature of what he was protecting. He just understood it was a matter of national security. The pieces fell into place. That's why he practically gave away the pharmacy. He needed someone to maintain the vault without asking questions. We believe so, yes. His health was failing, and he wanted to ensure continuity of protection. Mitchell leaned forward. Ms. Reynolds, what's in that vault represents millions of dollars in research and development. More importantly, it contains countermeasures for biological threats that could be catastrophic in the wrong hands. Madison took a deep breath, processing the implications. So what happens now? Do you take it all away? That's where things get complicated, Mitchell explained. Moving the materials requires special protocols and security clearances. We can't simply send in a team without raising exactly the kind of attention we've been avoiding. So you need me to keep protecting it, Madison concluded. While you arrange proper transport. In the short term, yes, but there's another issue. Mitchell's expression became more grave. If Chambers and Pharmplus are aware of the vault, which seems likely given her comments, they may take more aggressive measures to acquire this property. Your safety could be at risk. Madison thought of Jackson, of the dreams they were building in this town. What are you suggesting? Protective custody would be the safest option, Mitchell said. We could relocate you and your son temporarily, while we secure the materials and address the threat. The words hit Madison like a physical blow. Protective custody meant abandoning the pharmacy she'd fought so hard to establish. It meant disappearing from the community just as she was beginning to find her place. It meant disrupting Jackson's life yet again. How long? She asked, her voice tight. Impossible to say, Mitchell admitted. Weeks, possibly months, if this becomes a formal witness protection situation. No, the word escaped before Madison had fully processed her own thoughts. There has to be another way. Mitchell studied her with new respect. Most people would jump at the chance to walk away from this kind of trouble. I've never walked away from trouble in my life, Madison replied, thinking of her tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. I'm not starting now. A thoughtful expression crossed Mitchell's face. There might be an alternative. Risky, but potentially more effective in the long run. I'm listening. Instead of extracting you and the materials immediately, we could use this situation to gather evidence against Chambers and her organization. If they're trying to acquire biological countermeasures for unauthorized purposes, that's a serious national security threat. You want to use me as bait, Madison said bluntly. As an operational asset, Mitchell corrected. Your military background makes you uniquely qualified. With proper support and surveillance, you could help us document their approach and intentions. Madison considered the proposal. She'd faced danger before, had made tactical decisions. Under fire, this was different but no less significant. What about Jackson? He would need to be secured, Mitchell acknowledged. We could arrange temporary relocation for him with full protection while you remain here. The thought of separation from her son was painful, but Madison recognized the necessity. Jackson's safety had to come first. If I do this, she said. Slowly, I have conditions. Name them. First, Jackson gets full protection, no compromises. Second, I want assurance that after this is resolved, I can continue operating my pharmacy without interference. Third, I want to know exactly what's in that vault. If I'm protecting it, I need to understand the stakes, Mitchell nodded. The first two are easily granted. The third requires higher clearance, but given the circumstances, I believe it can be arranged. They spent the next hour outlining a preliminary plan. Madison would maintain normal operations while Mitchell's team established surveillance. They would document any further approaches from Chambers or her associates, building evidence of corporate espionage and attempted acquisition of classified materials. We'll need to move quickly, Mitchell advised. Once Chambers realizes you're not selling, she may escalate her tactics. As if summoned by the conversation, Madison's phone rang with an unknown number. Mitchell nodded for her to answer, moving closer to listen. Ms. Reynolds, Victoria Chambers' voice carried a note of impatience. I've been reconsidering our conversation yesterday. I'd like to meet again to discuss a revised offer. Perhaps over dinner tonight? Madison met Mitchell's gaze, receiving a subtle nod of encouragement. I'm not interested in selling, Ms. Chambers, but I would be willing to hear more about potential collaboration opportunities. Madison kept her voice steady, falling back on the discipline that had served her through combat situations. Excellent, Chambers replied, clearly pleased. The Harborside Restaurant, 7 o'clock? They have private dining rooms where we can speak freely. I'll be there, Madison confirmed, ending the call. Well done, Mitchell approved. This gives us time to prepare. We'll have agents in place, and you'll be wearing recording equipment. What about Jackson? Madison asked, her priorities clear. I've already arranged extraction. A team will arrive at your home in 1 hour, posing as relatives visiting from out of town. They'll explain everything to him and ensure his safety. The reality of the situation struck Madison anew. Within hours, her son would be whisked away to an undisclosed location, and she would be facing corporate agents attempting to acquire deadly biological countermeasures. Are you certain you want to proceed with this? Mitchell asked, observing her expression. We can still opt for full protective custody. Madison squared her shoulders, drawing on the strength that had carried her through battlefield trauma and personal loss. I've spent my entire adult life protecting others, she said firmly. First as a combat medic, now as a pharmacist. I'm not abandoning this community when they might be in danger. Not when I can help stop it. Mitchell's respect was evident in her gaze. I'll have a team brief you on operational details this afternoon. For now, maintain normal operations. Act as if nothing has changed. After Mitchell departed, Madison went through the motions of opening the pharmacy, checking inventory, and preparing for customers. Her mind, however, was churning with contingency plans and risk assessments, skills she'd hoped to leave behind with her military career, but now gratefully possessed. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Regular customers came and went, unaware of the drama unfolding beneath the surface of their community pharmacy. Madison maintained her professional demeanor, explaining medication interactions and offering health advice while mentally preparing for evening's covert operation. Shortly before noon, Thomas Blackwell stopped by with patient education materials he'd promised. His keen eyes noted Madison's tension immediately. Everything all right? He asked when they had a moment of privacy. Madison hesitated, torn between operational security and the need for local allies. Not exactly, she admitted. But I'm handling it. I may need to ask for your help soon, but I can't explain more right now. Thomas studied her with the evaluating gaze of an experienced physician. This is about the vault, isn't it? And Chambers? Madison's surprise must have shown on her face. Small towns have long memories, Thomas explained. When you mentioned finding something under the pharmacy, it connected some dots. There were always rumors about Bradshaw's father and his connection to the naval facility. You knew about this? Madison asked, incredulous. Not specifics, Thomas clarified. Just whispers over the years. Military research, special storage requirements. Unusual visitors. Bradshaw was tight-lipped, but in a community this size, patterns emerge. I need to handle this through official channels, Madison said carefully. But knowing I have allies here means more than I can say. Thomas placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that carried unexpected weight. The Blackwells have been protecting this community's health for 3 generations. Whatever you're facing, you're not facing it alone. That afternoon, Mitchell returned with 2 colleagues introduced only by first names, David and Lauren. They spent an hour briefing Madison on operational protocols, fitting her with recording equipment disguised as jewelry, and reviewing potential scenarios. Chambers will likely start with an improved financial offer, David explained. When that fails, she may move to threats or inducements. Your job is to keep her talking, to draw out as much information as possible about why they want this property specifically. What if she mentions the vault directly? Madison asked. Express surprise, then curiosity, Lauren advised. We need to establish that she has prior knowledge of classified materials. That's key to building our case. The rest of the day passed with agonizing slowness. Madison spoke with Jackson briefly by secure phone once he was safely in protective custody. Though she couldn't explain everything, her son understood enough from his own observation of recent events. Be careful, Mom, he said, his voice carrying a maturity beyond his 15 years. Whatever's happening, it's not worth risking your life. Some things are worth fighting for, Madison replied, thinking not just of national security, but of the community they were building, the future they were claiming. I'll be careful, I promise. At 6:45 that evening, Madison entered the Harborside restaurant, dressed in business attire that concealed the recording equipment. The Mater D led her to a private dining room overlooking the marina, where Victoria Chambers waited with 2 men in expensive suits. Ms. Reynolds, Chambers greeted her with practiced warmth. Thank you for joining us. Allow me to introduce Richard Brennan and James Cooper, senior executives with our parent company, Nexus Pharmaceuticals. Madison shook their hands, noting their firm grips and evaluating gazes. These were not ordinary business executives. They carried themselves with the alertness of men accustomed to risk and confrontation. Thank you for the invitation, she said, projecting confidence she didn't entirely feel. Though I'm still not interested in selling my pharmacy. Please sit, Chambers indicated the chair opposite her. We understand your position. That's why we wanted to discuss alternative arrangements that might benefit everyone. The meal began with polite conversation about Pinecrest Harbor, the challenges of healthcare in rural communities, and Madison's military background. Throughout, Madison maintained the relaxed vigilance she'd developed during high-stress combat deployments, appearing engaged while constantly assessing threats and escape routes. Your service record is impressive, Brennan commented as servers cleared the main course. 3 tours in Afghanistan, advanced medical training. You must have seen some remarkable innovations in battlefield medicine. Some, Madison acknowledged, cautiously, though most of my work was standard trauma care under difficult conditions. Ever encounter any unusual pharmaceuticals? Cooper asked, his tone conversational but his eyes intent. Experimental treatments, Advanced countermeasures? The directness of the question confirmed Madison's suspicions. This wasn't about real estate or market consolidation. They were fishing for information about the vault. Standard military. Formularies, she replied. Why do you ask? Chambers exchanged glances with her colleagues before leaning forward slightly. Ms. Reynolds, let's speak frankly. Your property has unique features that make it especially valuable to our organization. The corner location? Madison suggested innocently. Among other things, Brennan said with a thin smile. We believe the previous owner may have maintained certain specialized storage facilities that would be compatible with our research division's needs. Madison feigned confusion. I'm not sure I follow. It's a standard commercial building. Aside from some outdated equipment, perhaps you haven't explored the property thoroughly, Cooper suggested, his tone hardening slightly. Older buildings often have unexpected structural elements. Basements, storage areas, vaults. The word hung in the air between them, a clear indication they knew exactly what lay beneath the pharmacy. Now that you mention it, Madison said. Slowly, as if recalling something minor, there's an old storage cellar. Nothing special, just concrete walls and some outdated shelving. Mr. Bradshaw's daughter mentioned it was used for overflow inventory in busier times. The three executives exchanged glances, clearly not believing her casual dismissal. Ms. Reynolds, Chambers said, her friendly demeanor slipping, our offer is extremely generous. 5 times market value, plus a consulting position with Nexus. Pharmaceuticals at twice your current projected income. That's a remarkable offer for a failing pharmacy, Madison observed. What makes the property so valuable to you? Brennan leaned forward, abandoning pretense. Let's be direct. We know about the underground facility and its contents. Military-grade pharmaceutical countermeasures, developed at the Naval Research Center before its closure, stored in climate-controlled conditions with continuous power supply. How would you know about something like that? Madison asked, careful to sound genuinely surprised. Our company has extensive defense contracts. Cooper explained smoothly. We're aware of certain research initiatives that were discontinued. The formulations in that vault represent millions in R&D that we could legitimately acquire by purchasing the property. If these things exist, wouldn't they be government property? Madison pressed. Not something that transfers. With real estate. Technical oversights in the decommissioning process. Chambers dismissed with a wave. Bureaucratic failures that benefit whoever controls the physical location. In this case, you. Madison feigned thoughtful consideration. So you're saying there's something valuable beneath my pharmacy? Something worth millions? Precisely. Brennan confirmed, misinterpreting her interest as greed. Which is why our offer is so generous. You could walk away with financial security and none of the complications that come with possessing sensitive materials. What kinds of complications? Madison asked, encouraging them to elaborate on potential threats. Cooper's expression darkened. Military pharmaceuticals require specialized handling and security clearances. Possession without proper authorization carries severe penalties. Additionally, such materials often need regular maintenance to remain stable. Without proper expertise, they could become problematic. The veiled threat was unmistakable. Sell to us or face legal consequences and potential safety hazards. I see, Madison said, allowing concern to show on her face. That does sound complicated. Sensing advantage, Chambers pressed forward. We're prepared to finalize the transaction immediately. Full payment within 24 hours, relocation assistance, and a consulting contract ready to sign tonight. That's very efficient, Madison observed. Almost as if you've done this before. We've acquired several properties with similar attributes. Brennan acknowledged, revealing more than he perhaps intended. Former research sites, decommissioned military facilities. Our company specializes in repurposing valuable pharmaceutical assets that might otherwise go to waste. Madison nodded thoughtfully, mentally cataloging each damning admission for the recording. And these countermeasures, what exactly would your company do with them? Reverse engineer the formulations, Cooper explained. Develop proprietary versions for the commercial market. Some have applications beyond their original military purpose, cancer treatments, immunotherapy breakthroughs. There's enormous profit potential. And if I decline? Madison asked directly. The atmosphere in the room chilled perceptibly. That would be unfortunate, Chambers said softly. As Mr. Cooper mentioned, possession of such materials without proper authorization is problematic. Anonymous tips to regulatory agencies could trigger investigations. A single mother trying to start a new business might find such scrutiny overwhelming. Not to mention the practical concerns, Brennan added. Small-town pharmacies face countless challenges, supply issues, insurance complications, unexpected building code violations. It would be a shame if your fresh start encountered such obstacles. Madison let the threats hang in the air, appearing to consider them while actually ensuring clear audio capture. I need time to think about this, she said finally. It's a lot to process. Of course, Chambers agreed, though her expression suggested impatience. We can give you until tomorrow morning. After that, our offer becomes significantly less generous. As the dinner concluded with strained pleasantries, Madison felt the weight of what she'd uncovered. This wasn't simply corporate overreach. It was systematic exploitation of classified research for private profit, with implicit threats against those who stood in their way. Outside the restaurant, Madison breathed in the cool harbor air, centering herself before the drive home. Her military training had prepared her for physical danger, but this web of corporate espionage and pharmaceutical exploitation was unfamiliar territory. Commander Mitchell was waiting in an unmarked car a block from the restaurant. Madison slipped into the passenger seat, handing over the recording equipment. You did well, Mitchell said after listening to portions of the conversation. They implicated themselves thoroughly. Knowledge of classified materials, previous acquisitions of similar sites, intent to commercialize military formulations without authorization. This is exactly what we needed. What happens now? Madison asked. We move quickly. The recording goes to our legal team tonight. By morning, we should have authorization for arrests and seizure of Nexus Pharmaceuticals records. Mitchell studied Madison with genuine respect. You've done your country a significant service, though few will ever know the details. I don't need recognition, Madison replied honestly. I just want my pharmacy back, my son safe, and this community protected. That's the next phase, Mitchell assured her. We'll begin extracting the vault contents tomorrow under cover of routine deliveries. Within 72 hours, your pharmacy will be just a pharmacy, valuable for its corner location and community service, not for what's hidden beneath. As Madison drove home to her empty house, she reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. What had begun as a desperate attempt to create stability had thrust her into the center of a national security operation. Yet somehow it felt right. A continuation of her service in a different form. The moon cast silver light across Pinecrest Harbor as she stood on her porch, looking toward the town center where her pharmacy waited. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, she faced them with the certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do, protecting others, creating security, building something meaningful that would last beyond any single crisis. In that moment of clarity, standing between danger and resolution, Madison felt a profound connection to her father's legacy and her own evolving purpose. The pharmacy wasn't just a business. It was a promise to a community, a future for her son, and now, unexpectedly, a bulwark against those who would exploit national security for private gain. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, but tonight, Under the watchful moon, Madison Reynolds stood firm in the knowledge that some fights were worth every risk, every sacrifice, every moment of uncertainty. This was one of them. 3 months. After the dramatic arrest of Victoria Chambers and her co-conspirators, Reynolds' family pharmacy hummed with productive energy. The once neglected building now stood as a beacon of community health care, its fresh navy blue and white exterior matching the clear autumn sky. Inside, patients moved between consultation stations where staff provided personalized medication, reviews, and health education. Madison stood at the newly expanded dispensing counter, carefully checking a complex prescription for an elderly veteran. Her practiced movements reflected both her growing pharmaceutical expertise and her unwavering commitment to precision. The past months had transformed her from a tentative newcomer to a respected healthcare provider, a metamorphosis born of necessity, determination, and the crucible of extraordinary circumstances. "Ms. Reynolds," called a familiar voice, pulling her from her concentration. Madison looked up to see Commander Mitchell standing in the pharmacy entrance, dressed in civilian clothes, but still carrying herself with the unmistakable alertness of someone who assessed every room before entering it. "Commander Mitchell." Madison smiled, handing the completed prescription to her technician before approaching. "This is a pleasant surprise. What brings you to Pinecrest Harbor?" "Closure," Mitchell replied, her typically formal demeanor softening slightly. "And a personal courtesy. I thought you'd want to know directly rather than reading it in the news. The federal grand jury returned indictments this morning against Chambers, Brennan, and Cooper on all counts: conspiracy, corporate espionage, attempted acquisition of classified materials, interstate threats." Madison felt a profound sense of relief wash over her. The danger that had lurked beneath her pharmacy, both literally and figuratively, was finally being addressed through proper channels of justice. "The evidence from your recording was definitive," Mitchell continued. "Combined with the documentation we found during the raid on Nexus Pharmaceuticals headquarters, the prosecutor is confident they'll face significant prison time." "What about the other sites they mentioned acquiring?" Madison asked, lowering her voice though. The pharmacy was relatively empty at this hour. "We've identified 7 locations so far," Mitchell confirmed with satisfaction. "The team has recovered an alarming amount of classified pharmaceutical research that never should have left government control. The oversight failures that allowed this to happen are being addressed at the highest levels." Madison nodded, remembering the climate-controlled storage units and their carefully preserved contents. "And the materials from our vault? Have they been properly secured?" "Completely removed and transported to appropriate facilities," Mitchell assured her. "The vault itself has been permanently sealed and disguised. As far as anyone needs to know, it was just an old storage cellar that you've converted to additional inventory space." The commander glanced around the thriving pharmacy, noting the digital medication tracking stations and the veteran support center Madison had established in what had once been unused space. "You've clearly done well since our operation concluded," Mitchell observed. "The place looks completely transformed." Pride bloomed in Madison's chest as she followed Mitchell's gaze. The transformation went far beyond cosmetic improvements. Each change represented hours of planning, community collaboration, and relentless pursuit of her vision for accessible healthcare. "The Small Business Administration loan came through after the investigation cleared," Madison explained. "And once we formed the Healthcare Coalition, we were able to negotiate better terms with suppliers and insurance networks as a group, rather than individual practices." "Smart strategy," Mitchell observed. "The strength of community rather than isolated competition." "Exactly." Thomas and Diana share their patient education resources. Emma from the Wellness Center conducts stress management classes in our consultation room, and we provide medication management support for all their patients. It's a collaborative model rather than competitive. As they spoke, the pharmacy door chimed, and Jackson entered with Layla Patterson, both carrying promotional materials for the upcoming Veterans Health Fair. Jackson's face lit up when he spotted Mitchell. "Commander Mitchell," he called hastily, depositing his load on the counter before rushing over. "Did you tell Mom about the indictments? We saw it on the news alert." Mitchell smiled, a genuine expression that softened the professional facade she typically maintained. "I just shared the update. Your mother's testimony was instrumental in securing those charges." Jackson beamed with pride, glancing at Madison with undisguised admiration. "That's my mom, taking down pharmaceutical conspiracies while building the best pharmacy in 3 counties. The casual confidence in her son's voice touched Madison deeply. The frightened teenager who had been whisked away to protective custody just months ago had blossomed into a poised young man with purpose and pride in their shared accomplishment. "The health fair preparations are coming along well," Jackson reported, switching to business mode. "We've got 28 healthcare providers participating, free screenings for PTSD and related conditions, and the governor's office confirmed they're sending a representative to discuss the Rural Veteran Healthcare Initiative." Mitchell raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "Governor's office? You've developed some significant connections." "The Pinecrest model is gaining attention," Madison explained with modest pride. "Our approach to collaborative rural healthcare delivery with special emphasis on veteran services is showing promising results in patient outcomes and cost management. The State Veterans Affairs Department is considering it as a template for other underserved communities." Layla, who had been organizing the promotional materials, joined the conversation. "Ms. Reynolds has revolutionized healthcare access here," she said with the enthusiasm of youth. "My grandfather used to drive 90 minutes each way for his VI appointments. Now specialists come to the monthly Veterans Clinic days, and Ms. Reynolds coordinates all their medication protocols." Madison felt her cheeks warm at the praise. "It's a team effort," she demurred. "And speaking of teams, Layla has been accepted to pharmacy school for next fall. She'll be returning to Pinecrest after graduation as part of our rural healthcare development program." Mitchell studied Madison with newfound respect. "When we first met, you were fighting to keep your business alive. Now you're implementing systemic healthcare reform and developing the next generation of providers. That's quite an evolution in 3 months." "Necessity is a powerful motivator," Madison replied. "After everything that happened, it became clear that isolated, competitive healthcare models were failing our community. We needed a different approach." Before Mitchell could respond, Francine Miller bustled through the door, her arms laden with medical supplies. Unlike her first visits to the pharmacy, when skepticism had sharpened her every word, today she moved with the comfortable familiarity of a frequent collaborator. "Madison, the blood pressure cuffs for the health fair just arrived," she announced. Then noticed Mitchell. "Commander Mitchell, good to see you again. Are you here about the verdicts?" As Francine joined their conversation, Thomas and Diana Blackwell arrived with additional supplies for the health fair booth they would share with Madison's pharmacy. Within minutes, the small gathering had expanded to include Emma Lawson and Robert Garrison, each contributing updates on their portion of the collaborative event. Mitchell watched with fascination as the once fragmented, suspicious business owners coordinated their efforts with practiced efficiency. The transformation wasn't just in Madison's pharmacy, but in the entire community's approach to working together. "I should let you get back to your preparations," Mitchell said after observing for several minutes. "I just wanted to deliver the news personally and see how you were doing." "I appreciate that," Madison replied sincerely. "Would you like a tour before you go? The facility decommissioning is complete, but I think you'll find what we've done with the space interesting." Mitchell nodded, and Madison led her through the transformed pharmacy. The former storeroom where they had discovered the underground vault had been converted into a veteran support center with telehealth stations and a dedicated area for support group meetings. The dispensing area now featured advanced technology that allowed for greater accuracy and efficiency. The consultation rooms provided privacy for in-depth medication therapy management. "Impressive," Mitchell commented as they completed the circuit. "You've created something remarkable here." "From necessity," Madison acknowledged, "but also from possibility. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal what might be built from the ruins." They paused at the spot where the entrance to the underground vault had been permanently sealed and disguised beneath new flooring. Nothing remained visible of the secret that had once threatened everything Madison was building. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't discovered that vault?" Mitchell asked quietly. "If you had simply continued operating without knowing what was beneath your feet?" Madison considered the question carefully. "Sometimes. But I've learned that most of life is like that. We build on foundations we didn't create, sometimes without knowing what lies beneath. The question isn't whether there are hidden challenges, but how we respond when they're revealed." Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. "Most people would have run when given the option of protective custody. You chose to stand your ground and fight." "I had something worth fighting for," Madison replied simply. "Not just the business, but the future it represented for Jackson and me. The chance to put down roots, to belong somewhere." As they returned to the front of the pharmacy, Madison found her team had expanded their health fair planning session to include representatives from the local school and senior center. Ideas flowed freely, each person building on other suggestions with enthusiasm and purpose. "Your son mentioned the Pinecrest model," Mitchell said, observing the collaborative energy. "But it seems to me this is really the Madison model, bringing people together to create something stronger than they could build alone." Madison shook her head, genuinely uncomfortable with the attribution. "I just created a space where cooperation could happen. The community did the rest." "Don't underestimate your impact," Mitchell insisted. "Not everyone can envision possibilities beyond traditional boundaries. That's a rare gift." After Mitchell departed, Madison rejoined the planning session seamlessly, integrating into the community she had once viewed from the outside. As they finalized the health fair schedule, she caught Jackson watching her with a knowing smile. "What?" Madison asked during a brief lull in the conversation. "Nothing," Jackson replied, his eyes twinkling. "Just thinking about how far we've come since you dragged me to that business meeting 3 months ago." Madison glanced around at the faces surrounding them, people who had begun as skeptics and evolved into partners, colleagues who had become friends. "We've all come a long way." Later that evening, after the pharmacy closed and the last of their collaborators had departed, Madison and Jackson sat in the consultation room reviewing the day's accomplishments. The golden light of sunset streamed through the windows, casting the space in a warm glow that matched Madison's sense of contentment. "I got my college application essay finished," Jackson mentioned casually, though his slightly nervous tone betrayed the statement's importance. "That's wonderful," Madison replied. "What topic did you finally decide on?" Jackson hesitated briefly. "I wrote about moving here and starting over, about watching you face impossible challenges and build something meaningful anyway." Emotion welled in Madison's throat. "You wrote about me?" "About us," Jackson corrected gently. "About how courage isn't fearlessness, it's moving forward despite fear. How community isn't something you find, but something you create through persistent connection." The mature insight from her once reluctant teenager left Madison momentarily speechless. The journey that had begun with a desperate $600 investment in a failing pharmacy had yielded dividends far beyond business success. The admissions counselor who reviewed my draft said it was one of the most compelling essays she'd read. Jackson continued, a hint of pride coloring his voice. She said it showed unusual depth of understanding about resilience and community building. "She's right," Madison managed, blinking back unexpected tears. "You do understand those things deeply." "Because I learned from the best," Jackson replied simply. Before Madison could respond, her phone chimed with an incoming message. Glancing at the screen, she saw a text from Thomas Blackwell. "Just heard from the State Veterans Affairs Director. They've approved our integrated care proposal. Full funding for the Rural Veterans Healthcare Initiative. We did it." Madison showed the message to Jackson, whose eyes widened with excitement. "Mom, do you know what this means? The entire Pinecrest model will be implemented across the state. Your vision is going statewide." The magnitude of the news took a moment to register. What had begun as a desperate attempt to salvage her modest business investment had evolved into an innovative healthcare delivery system that would now extend far beyond Pinecrest Harbor. "Not my vision," Madison corrected gently. "Our collective vision. Everyone contributed essential elements." "But it started with you," Jackson insisted. "With your willingness to try something different when the traditional approach wasn't working." As they locked up the pharmacy and headed home, Madison reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 3 months, from the moment she had discovered the hidden vault beneath her newly purchased pharmacy. Events had unfolded with breathtaking speed and intensity. The danger had been real, the stakes impossibly high, the outcomes far from certain. Yet through it all, she had held fast to a simple truth. Forward was the only direction worth moving. Each obstacle had presented not just a challenge, but an opportunity to reimagine possibilities. Each setback had forced creative solutions that ultimately strengthened their position. The following morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the Veterans Health Fair that would occupy the town square. Madison arrived early to help with the final preparations, watching with satisfaction as colorful tents and information booths transformed the space into a celebration of community wellness. Thomas approached as she reviewed the schedule of events. His normally serious expression relaxed into genuine happiness. "Can you believe this?" he asked, gesturing to the bustling square. 3 months ago, we were all struggling independently against corporate takeover. Now we're implementing a statewide healthcare model. It's remarkable what becomes possible when people work together. "That's the real success story here," Madison agreed. "Not just the business growth or program funding, but the fundamental shift in how we approach challenges. That's your legacy too, Thomas." Before he could deflect the praise, Francine and Emma joined them, followed by Robert and other community leaders. Each brought updates, questions, and enthusiastic ideas for expanding their collaborative efforts. As the health fair officially opened and residents began flowing into the square, Madison stepped back to observe the transformation around her. Veterans lined up for health screenings at one booth, while seniors received medication reviews at another. Community health workers demonstrated proper techniques for managing chronic conditions, and nutrition experts offered practical cooking demonstrations. In every direction, she saw evidence of what could be accomplished when people united around a common purpose. The competitive isolation that had once defined Pinecrest Harbor's healthcare landscape had given way to a vibrant ecosystem of integrated services. "Ms. Reynolds," a man's hesitant voice drew Madison's attention. She turned to find an elderly veteran she recognized as one of Thomas's patients. "Yes, Mr. Jenkins, how can I help you?" "I just wanted to thank you," the man said, his weathered hands clutching a medication organizer emblazoned with the Reynolds Family Pharmacy logo. "Before you came, I was taking 14 different pills from 4 different doctors, and nobody seemed to know what the others were prescribing. Now everything's coordinated, and I'm down to just 6 medications. I can afford them all, and for the first time in years, I actually understand what each one does." The simple testimonial touched Madison deeply. Behind all the programs, initiatives, and systemic changes, this was the true measure of success: individual lives improved through accessible, coordinated care. "You're very welcome, Mr. Jenkins. That's exactly why we're here." As the veteran moved on to explore other health fair booths, Jackson appeared at Madison's side, accompanied by a professional-looking woman in a tailored suit. "Mom, this is Catherine Bennett from the governor's office. She'd like to discuss expanding the Pinecrest model to other counties." Madison greeted the representative warmly, answering her questions about implementation challenges and success metrics. As their conversation progressed, Catherine's initial professional interest evolved into genuine enthusiasm. "This is exactly the kind of innovative ground-up solution the governor has been seeking," she explained. "Healthcare delivery that's responsive to local needs while providing scalable, sustainable frameworks. Would you be willing to consult on the statewide implementation?" The question caught Madison by surprise. "Me? I'm just a pharmacy owner with a military background." Catherine smiled knowingly. "You're the architect of a healthcare delivery revolution that's showing measurable improvements in patient outcomes, provider satisfaction, and cost management. Your background in combat medicine actually makes you ideally suited to help other communities implement similar models." Jackson squeezed his mother's arm encouragingly. "Say yes, Mom. This is what you're meant to do." Looking around at the thriving health fair, the physical manifestation of what could be created from vision and perseverance, Madison felt a surge of certainty. The journey that had begun with a desperate $600 investment had led her to this moment of unexpected opportunity and profound purpose. "Yes," she said simply. "I'd be honored to help." As the day progressed, Madison moved through the health fair, connecting with community members, answering questions, and witnessing the impact of their collective efforts. The transformation extended far beyond the physical changes to her pharmacy, or even the improved healthcare services. It resided in the renewed spirit of the community itself, a recognition that together they could create solutions that had seemed impossible in isolation. Late that afternoon, as the event began winding down, Madison found a quiet moment to slip away from the activity. She walked the short distance to her pharmacy, unlocking the door and stepping into the peaceful interior. Moving to the spot where the entrance to the underground vault had been, she stood silently, acknowledging the remarkable chain of events that had unfolded from that discovery. The military bioweapon antidotes hidden beneath her pharmacy had presented an existential threat, not just to her business but potentially to global health security. Yet that same discovery had catalyzed connections, innovations, and transformations that would now benefit countless individuals. "Mom," Jackson's voice called softly from the doorway. "Everyone's gathering for the closing ceremony. They want you to speak." Madison turned to her son, struck by the confident young man who had emerged from this journey. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out if we hadn't found that hidden door? Or if we had just sold to Pharmplus when things got dangerous?" Jackson considered the question thoughtfully. "Sometimes. But then I remember something you told me when Dad died and we had to start over the first time." "What's that?" "You said that life's hardest moments often lead to our greatest growth, but only if we're brave enough to keep moving forward through the uncertainty." Jackson's eyes shone with emotion and wisdom beyond his years. "That's what you did here, Mom. You kept moving forward even when forward led straight into danger. You showed me what courage really looks like." Madison embraced her son, overwhelmed by gratitude for the journey they had shared. "We showed each other." Together, they returned to the town square where the community had gathered for the closing ceremony. As Madison took her place at the podium, she gazed out at the faces before her, once strangers, now partners in an enterprise far greater than any individual business. 3 months ago, she began, her voice steady with conviction, "I stood in this town as an outsider with nothing but a $600 investment and a desperate hope for a fresh start. What I found beneath that investment, both literally and figuratively, challenged everything I thought I knew about business, community, and myself." A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the crowd, those familiar with the full story appreciating the multiple layers of her reference. But here's what I've learned from our journey together. The most valuable discoveries aren't found in hidden vaults or secret formulas. They're found in the connections we forge when facing common challenges. They're found in the innovation that emerges when diverse perspectives unite around shared purpose. She paused, making eye contact with Thomas and Diana, with Francine, with Emma and Robert, with each person who had contributed to their collective transformation. The Pinecrest model isn't remarkable because it's perfect. It's remarkable because it's adaptive, collaborative, and fundamentally human. It recognizes that healthcare isn't just about medications or treatments. It's about creating systems that honor individual needs while harnessing collective strengths. As the golden afternoon light bathed the gathering, Madison felt a profound sense of homecoming, not to a place, but to a purpose. The veteran who had arrived with nothing but determination and a meager investment had found something far more valuable than financial security. She had discovered her unique capacity to bridge divides, envision possibilities, and catalyze transformation. Our journey is just beginning, she concluded, her gaze finding Jackson in the crowd. But we move forward together, knowing that whatever challenges await, we have already proven our capacity to transform obstacles into opportunities. That is the true legacy of Pinecrest Harbor. Not just what we've built, but how we've built it together. The applause that followed reflected more than approval for her words. It celebrated the spirit of possibility that now defined their community, a spirit that had emerged from the most unexpected beginning. A broke veteran purchasing a closed pharmacy for $600, never imagining that beneath its worn floors lay not just military bioweapon antidotes worth millions, but the catalyst for her most meaningful life's work. As Madison stepped away from the podium, surrounded by the community that had become her home, she embraced the beautiful truth that had emerged from their extraordinary journey. Sometimes life's most powerful transformations begin with the courage to invest in possibilities others cannot yet see. 3 days later, standing in her thriving pharmacy as the morning sunlight streamed through the windows, Madison gazed at the framed newspaper article hanging beside the pharmacy license. The headline read, "Local Pharmacist Honored for Veterans. Healthcare Innovation." The story mentioned nothing about hidden vaults or classified pharmaceuticals. Those details remain sealed in confidential government files. Instead, it celebrated the collaborative healthcare model that had revitalized Pinecrest Harbor and would soon transform veteran services statewide. A young veteran entered, looking uncertain as he approached the counter. "Ms. Reynolds? I just moved to town. I heard this is the place to come for medication management." Madison smiled, extending her hand in welcome. "You heard right. Let's get you set up with everything you need." As she led him toward the consultation room, her eyes briefly met Jackson's across the pharmacy. Her son nodded in quiet understanding, both of them recognizing that this, more than any hidden treasure or government secret, was the true value of what they had built together. A place where people could find not just medications, but genuine care, connection, and community. And that was worth more than all the millions in military bioweapon antidotes combined. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.